70 שנה במכונית, אני נוסע ומביט על מה היה ומה נהיה, ואיך נפשי עוד הומייה מהמצדה של הזריחות, ירושלים בסליחות, מחוף כנרת ואכסי, מהמסיבות של תל אביב. אבי חלם והתפלל לחיות בארץ ישראל. היום ילדי אותי שואל מה הסיפור של ישראל. כאן זה בית, כאן זה לב, ואותך אני לא עוזב. אבותינו שורשים, ואנחנו הפרחים המנגינות, שבט אחים ואחיות, אותה שכונה, אותו רחוב, תרי סרבנים של ים עד כה, אוספים ביחד נדודים בתוך תרמיל געגועים. אדם ונוף מולדתו, חורת קווים בכף ידו, בין התפילות לנדרים ריחות פרדס של הדרים, ובעיניה של אמי תמיד אמצא את מקומי. על הגיטרה מתנגן ניגון עתיק שמחבר. כאן זה בית, כאן זה לב, ואותך אני לא עוזב. אבותינו שורשים, ואנחנו הפרחים המנגינות, שבט אחים ואחיות. מבראשית הכל תפור, טלאים טלאים של הסיפור, כמו שתי מילים להתחבר בחוט זהב של משורר. אני מכאן, אני שייך, וכל חבר שלי כמו אח. אתה פועמת בלבבי, אני מזרח מערבי. כאן זה לב, ואותך אני לא עוזב. אבותינו שורשים, ואנחנו הפרחים המנגינות, שבט אחים ואחיות. כאן זה בית, כאן זה לב, ואותך אני לא עוזב. אבותינו שורשים, ואנחנו הפרחים המנגינות, שבט אחים ואחיות. ואותך אני לא עוזב. אבותינו שורשים, ואנחנו הפרחים המנגינות, שבט אחים ואחיות. שבט אחים ואחיות.
כאן זה בית, כאן זה לב, ואותך אני לא עוזב. אבותינו השורשים, ואנחנו הפרחים, המנגינות, שבט אחים ואחיות.
ברוכים הבאים. אז כנראה אנחנו מחכים לעוד כמה אנשים. We have a few more people that I'm hoping are still going to join us, but I think I will launch into the program, and I hope that both Manette and Walt will join us by video, hopefully, as well. Erev Tov, and I want to welcome you to our annual Forum Kumzitz online celebration. This year, we are also acknowledging the exciting milestone of the founding of the State of Israel 75 years ago. With all that is going on, it is important that we stand back in awe of the fact that there is a Jewish state. And in particular, this evening, celebrate the unique and remarkable revival of Hebrew as a modern language spoken by over 9 million people worldwide. Our goal is not only to see Hebrew as the language of the state of Israel, Medinat Yisrael, but to contribute to ensuring that Hebrew is the language of the Jewish people, Am Yisrael, a language that connects all of us across diversity and yet acknowledging our unity. I want to thank all of you for being our partners in this pursuit and many others who, due to many competing commitments this evening, were not able to join us. And in order to make sure that we get to know who is around the screen, and we are missing a few people that we did expect. I thought I'd start by having everybody just introduce yourself, tell us where you're calling from, and tell me share what your favorite Hamantashen filling is. Given we hopefully all got to have some Hamantashen this week. So for those, I think everybody here who knows me, Arnie Winchall, calling in from Weston, Massachusetts. And actually, my favorite filling is not the traditional poppy seed, but I actually love apricot. And so, to say Hamantashen in Hebrew, we say Ozen Haman, the ears of Haman, and apricot jam would be Libat Mishmashim, that is the filling, the apricot filling. So we're going to turn it over to Leah to introduce herself, because she's to my left on my screen.
Thanks, Arnie. Hi, I'm Leah. I am calling in from Tenafly, New Jersey. And for me, my favorite flavor for Oznei Haman is I like Nutella and halva together. Not as traditional.
Louis.
I have a sweet tooth. And I'll pass it along, I guess, to the person left of my screen, and that's Esty.
Oh, thank you. So I'm Esty, and I am in Los Angeles, California. You could see I'm wearing short sleeves. It's really warm today. And my favorite is raspberry petel. Petel.
Learn the word petal today so that I would know what the filling raspberry was.
So I'll go to, I guess, Andrew, you're the next on my, go ahead.
Andrew Ergis, nice to see you all this evening. I'm in there with Arnie. I've always loved mishmish, not only the taste, but also the sound of the word. So I like my Oznei Haman imribat mishmish. And I'm looking to the right of me, and I'm calling in from Westchester, but I'm looking towards the northeast and see Diane Trotterman.
Hi, nice to see you and be here. I also have my phone with me because I wear hearing aids, and I wanted to hear if I could hear you through the hearing aids as well without having a craziness. But I can hear you on my screen too, so I'm fine. I think prunes, believe it or not, I do think prunes are my favorite.
Oh, Esty, I need learn a new word. Prunes favorite.
And I'm going to turn it over to my dear friend Josh.
It's prune בעברית שזיפים, שזיף.
Oh, shazifim, it's It's a dried plum, the shazif.
I'm Josh Elkin, and I'm calling in from Kirkland, Washington State. And I would say that I'm just following with the choice. Both the choices, apricot, mishmish, as being a favorite, but shazifim זה גם כן משהו, אז אני נותן את המקום א', מצידי זה שזיפי.
יופי. Walt, do you want to take it up from here on you?
I'm calling in from Weston, Massachusetts also. And apricot is apparently my favorite.
Mishmish.
If you'd asked me a couple of days ago, I wouldn't have been sure, but I had the opportunity to choose among a number of them a couple of times, and I picked apricot both times, so it's my favorite.
Manette.
I am Manette Mayberg from, well, not from Silver Spring, but I'm in Silver Spring, Silver Spring, Maryland. It's a tough one because like really anything that's cherry filling is like the favorite in our house. You don't see that so often with hamantaschen. But if I could imagine my favorite hamantaschen, it would be Dude Devani. Dude
Devani. Yopi. Nice. Dude Devani. Nice. I don't know if Ellie and Mark Liner, I don't know if you can put your video or mute, but we were introducing ourselves and where we're calling in from and our favorite hamantaschen. I don't know if you can unmute. We have, I know Ellie and Mark are calling in from Los Angeles. Oh, it will be a mystery what their favorite hamantaschen is.
I can say that Esty and I had the opportunity to meet with Ellie and Mark last week. Oh, here they are, and Ellie made some extraordinary hamantaschen, which she appeared to have wrapped, made them with phyllo dough or something like that, with sort of herbs on the outside and sweet on the inside. It was just fantastic. And Ellie, now we see you and Mark.
Hey, hello there.
Hi.
Ellie, what is on the inside and the outside of your hamantaschen?
Oh, this year I tried something new because there's a cafe near us that's where are they from? Cuban, and they use a lot of guava paste in their pastries. So I hunted for guava paste in my neighborhood and I found it. So I made some hamantaschen with guava paste inside. You know, I also made chocolate ones. I made pecan ones. And I made some with phyllo. But it was just fun and they came out okay. It's supposed to have cheese in it, but I didn't put any in because I'm sending some to my grandchildren, which I did today. It's late, but I made them during Purim, so I think that counts.
Lucky then. So nobody picked Peleg, the poppy seed, the traditional poppy seed.
But we still have Neil and Susan.
You know, they don't sell that.
And Susan, here you go. Tell us where you're calling in from and what you picked. You have to unmute, Neil.
Yeah, we're calling in from Miami, and a friend brought over some hamantash from this kosher bakery in Surfside, and in addition to the poppy seed tradition, he brought in some that had cherry in it. I heard cherry mentioned before. It was delicious.
Cherry. Wonderful. Susan, do you like the cherries too?
I like one,
Mun.
the poppy
In
seed.
Hebrew is Peleg. So I won't go into the history of Hamantashen, which actually comes from Germany in the 1800s, but I will turn over the program now to Andrew, our esteemed CEO, and he's going to introduce the first part. We'll have a video that actually is going to be in Hebrew on poetry and on Hebrew poetry, and it will have subtitles underneath for those of you who will be challenged by this talk. And then after that, we'll have a Q&A in which Esty and Andrew will talk more about Hebrew poetry. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Andrew, to introduce the video.
Arnie, thank you so much, and thank everyone here for joining us. It's pretty amazing, even though it's an intimate group. We have the Northeast and the Southeast, the Southwest and the Northwest, and even the Pacific Southwest. We're really across the continent. When we were thinking about Israel's 75th, we really were thinking about it through the lens of Hebrew, but I do want to take just one moment to note, as lovely and beautiful as that opening video was, and that kind of shared the Eretz Yisrael Hayafa, sort of what can be really beautiful about Israel. We know we're in a really difficult time right now, and I think it would behoove us to remember that Israel is a Jewish initiative, and that we all have a responsibility to be engaged when times are wonderful and sweet, and when times are difficult. And we are certainly in a difficult time. And just earlier today, I was talking with another educator, and we were sharing a section of, a famous story from the Talmud about who's held responsible for the destruction of Jerusalem. And the Talmud doesn't hold the Romans responsible. It holds us responsible when we allow sinat chinam, sort of senseless hatred and anger amongst brothers and sisters. And so I hope that this evening, part of what we're reminded about is how Hebrew can serve as a connector, and Hebrew can serve as a bridge. And the more that we engage in it, the more we can be partners in realizing the incredibly powerful and compelling and historic and divine vision of what the Jewish state can be and needs to be. So with that, we know Israel has changed a lot over the years, and so has Hebrew. We're not only honoring 75 years of Hebrew, it's now been 100 years since the passing of Eliezer ben Yehuda. And with the establishment of the state, we returned to Jewish sovereignty with the establishment of Eliezer ben Yehuda and his group of Mishugei Davar, somewhat similar to our group of Mishugei Davar. They brought Hebrew. Hebrew came back from being merely a written and read language to being a dynamic, living language with all that comes with it. And although he had a very clear vision of exactly how that was going to unfold, that's not how languages work. So when we at Hebrew at the Center have been thinking about our own evolution and our own growth and our own maturation, we've also been thinking, how do we make certain that we also are dynamic, that we are also evolving as we think about Hebrew and Hebrew language education? And as a part of that, we started thinking, who else do we need to have on our team who can help us think not only about the importance of second language pedagogy and Hebrew language instruction, but also all of the different ways that Hebrew plays a role in the lives of our students, their families, their schools, their community. And we began to bring onto our team some people who could bring some depth and perspective that was different than some of the perspectives that have been sort of the normative voices in our organization. So obviously one of the most important people we brought on was Dr. Esti Gross, our Chief of Staff. Esti comes to the table with tremendous depth when it comes to second language acquisition, pedagogy, a long history as a leader in schools, a long history as a leader in the field. We added to our team Dr. Rita Kreitman, who comes to Hebrew language not only as a speaker of Hebrew and a speaker of multiple languages, but as somebody whose doctorate really looked at it through the lens of linguistics and in phonetics and sort of the structures, how language functions in our brain. We've added onto our team Dr. Michal Peles Almagor, who comes to Hebrew from the perspective of literature and from culture, University of Chicago graduate, but somebody who works in a lot of important Israel engagement spaces as well. And as we've also seen many of the changes going on in our community and in our schools, we also happen to be in the international month, the international month of focusing on women. Yesterday was International Women's Day. We also added onto our team Tal Jenner Klausner, who's a graduate of the Middlebury program and a scholar who focuses on the relationship between language and power and language and justice and language and gender. And when we realized we had all of these really interesting people sitting at our table, we said, what might it be like to think about Hebrew and to think about Hebrew culture through all of these perspectives? And so we assembled for our annual Hebrew Language Educators Conference, Hit Kadmut, an hour-long session where we were joined by a number of educators from the field and from schools, and we looked at a new piece of Hebrew poetry, something that reflects where Israel is and where Hebrew is, and the complexities and the different perspectives. And we did some unpacking of that. So what I'm excited to share with you is an abridged version of that. We'll be happy to send you a link to the full hour. There's a lot going on. However, it's only in Hebrew. But for at least this shorter piece, you'll get a bit of a taste, and we'll be unpacking the piece of poetry that we were so excited to send you with your Mishloach Manot. So with that, let me share my screen, and you should take notes. I did the translation and the subtitles, and then you can give me a grade at the end.
בפאנל שלנו היום השתתפו הרב אנדרו ארגס, שיגיד שלום, המנכ"ל של עברית במרכז, איש חינוך של שנים רבות ודוקטורנט בחינוך בסמינר התיאולוגי יהודי, דוקטור אסתי גרוס, שתגיד לנו שלום, סמנכ"לית חינוך בעברית למרכז, עם בוודאי עבר וניסיון עשיר של למעלה מ-25 שנה בהוראת שפה, דוקטור רינה קרייטמן, רינה, תגידי לנו זה, מנהלת תחום למידה מקצועית בעברית במרכז ומומחית לפונטיקה ופונולוגיה עברית, וטל ז'אנר קלוזנר, הרכז הפדגוגי לקורסי העברית של בית הספר לשפות, כאן זה לא אולפן, ויועצת בחירה לצדק לשוני ומגדר בעברית במרכז. ואני רק אגיד על עצמי שאני דוקטור מיכל פלס אלמגור, ואני בעוונותיי מתמחה בספרות עברית. שירה, מה שאני מנסה להגיד, ששירה באמת מכניסה אותנו לכל מיני פינות, כי מראש יש לזה כל מיני סטיגמות, נכון? איזה סטיגמות אנחנו מכירים על שירה? נגיד, אפשר גם להכניס בצ'אט, כן? שזה אולי של שפה גבוהה, נכון? משהו שהוא פחות מתקשר, ובאמת יש משהו בתוך כל גם בשירה שנחשב אצלנו לאיזה תרבות גבוהה, ואז גם איך אנחנו מנגישים את זה לעצמנו, קודם כל, ואז גם לתלמידים והתלמידות שלנו. והיום אנחנו רוצים להזמין אתכם ואותנו ביחד, איך אנחנו יכולים להשתמש בשירה כדוגמה לז'אנר מסוים, ז'אנר קצר, יש לומר, בתחום הספרות, איך אנחנו יכולים להשתמש בזה בעבודה שלנו בתור מורים ומורות לשפה, וגם בעוד דרך גם להשאיר את הגישה שלנו, את הידע שלנו אל תוך הספרות, השפה העברית, ובטח גם התרבות הישראלית או התרבות העברית בתוך כל מה שהשירה נושאת בתוכה ומייצגת. והיום אנחנו גם נוכל ככה נזמין את כולכם ביחד, את כולנו ביחד, לצעוד לתוך המרחב של השיר, גם כדי להשאיר את ההוראה שלנו וגם כדי לשמוע ככה בדיוק את הצוות שכינסנו כאן היום, שידברו איתנו על השירה מנקודות מבט שונות, כל אחד מאוד מהזווית הייחודית, גם מפדגוגיה, גם מקשרים אינטרטקסטואליים או קשרים ככה למקורות, שכבר התחלנו לשמוע על זה קצת ממאיר שלו ואיך שהוא משתמש בזה היום, וגם מנקודות מבט של פואטיקה ושאלות של מגדר ושאלות גם של משלבים לשוניים, ואיך אנחנו נחשוב ביחד על השיר, על המשורר ועל כל המרחב. לשיר קוראים עד שהגיע לגיל 3, לא סיפרתי לבני על אלוהים. עד שהגיע לגיל 3, לא סיפרתי לבני על אלוהים. שלא יפחד, וכשנעשה בן 3, ערכתי ביניהם היכרות. זה אלוהי, אמרתי לבני. זה בני, אמרתי לאלוהי. שאלו כל אחד שאלות זה על זה. בני שאל, האם אלוהיך זהו אחד מקרובנו, כמו סב, כמו דוד? לא בדיוק, עניתי לו. אלוהי שאל, מה שם לבך? עניתי לו, שמות רבים לבני, מתוק ומתוק אל, חמוד וחמוד אל, חביב וחביב אל. בני שאל, מה שם אלוהיך? עניתי לו, שמות רבים לאלוהי, הוא אבינו מלכנו, והוא הקדוש ברוך הוא, והוא ריבונו של עולם, והוא השם יתברך, והוא אל ואלוהים ואלוהי. אלוהי החל אומר, בנך יחידך אשר אהבת, ומיד השמתי עצמי, כמי ששוב אינו שומע את קולו. בני שאל, את מי תאהב יותר? ושמחתי שהופיעה המילה אהבה בדיבורו, ומיד הסחתי דעתו באצבעי על מטוס שחלף בשמיים ועל חיפושית שעברה בינינו בדשא, ובמקום לומר לו, כל אלו מעשי אלוהי, אמרתי לו, יפים, נכון? ובעצם הרבה מהשיר, ממה שהוא מדבר עליו, זה על מתן שם. נכון? יש פה הרבה עניינים של שמות. ורציתי לשאול אם כל אחד יכול, או יסכימו לשתף, קודם כל מה השם? איזה סוג של שמות יש לכם ולכן? האם יש איזשהו שם פרטי שקוראים לכם בבית, השם העברי אולי? איזה שם מרגיש לכם ולכן יותר אישי, יותר אינטימי, או שזה דווקא השם הרשמי שלכם? נגיד, אני כשאני אומרת מיכל פלס אלמגור, זה תמיד מרגיש לי כמו בן אדם אחר, כן?
זה מעניין, כי אני חשבתי על השם העברי, אני אנדרו בעבודה היומיומית, אבל השם העברי זה אברהם, והשיר הזה מאוד מזכיר לי על אברהם הראשון, והאשליות בין השיר ובין הטקסט הקלאסי של עקדת יצחק והקשר בין האב ובין הבן, אבל השיחות בין האב ובין השם והאב ובין הבן, אבל אין שום שיחה כאן בין הבן ובין אלוהים. זה היה מאוד מעניין.
כשאני קראתי את השיר הזה בפעם הראשונה, אז אין מה לעשות, אני חושבת שאני לא משנה מה אני בעולם, התפקידים השונים, אני תמיד מסתכלת על זה מהזווית של המורה לעברית, שצריכה ללמד ילדים ברמת מתחילים גבוהה, תמיד היו לי תלמידים כאלה, אז מה שאני מסתכלת על השיר, אני ישר חושבת מה המבנה הרטורי שלו, מה אוצר המילים, אני חושבת על זה שיש, התמות שיש שם, זה בעצם איזה שיחת, גם שיחת היכרות, גם משהו על משפחה, גם שאלות ותשובות, זאת אומרת, אני כבר כל הדברים האלה ככה צצים לי, ואחר כך אני אספר איך אני מארגנת את כל האסוציאציות האלה שעולות לי, אבל זה פחות או יותר על הדברים שאני חושבת עליהם. אז באמת אני חושבת, הדבר הראשון זה לאיזה גיל זה מתאים, וגם לאיזה רמה, ואני חושבת כיוון שבאמת יש שם שיח בין אבא לבן, אמנם אלוהים נכנס לכל הדבר הזה, אבל באמת זה שיח יחסית פשוט, ואז אני חושבת שזה יכול גם להתאים לילדים מכיתה ה' ומעלה, זה יכול להתאים גם מבחינת האוצר המילים שמדבר על משפחה ועל היכרות, אבל אולי לא הייתי מפגישה את זה עם ילדים שיש להם רקע גם מן המקורות, זאת אומרת שהם מכירים את סיפור עקדת יצחק, או לחלופין אפשר ללמד את סיפור עקדת יצחק קודם, זאת אומרת, או אחר כך, ואז לקלף לאט לאט את השיר, איזה שאלות אני אשאל בשלב הפשט, איזה שאלות אני אשאל בשלב הדרש, ואחר כך בשלב השלישי, בשלב הסוד, זאת אומרת, אנחנו כבר, אני רואה את השיר כבצל שצריך לקלף ממנו את הקליפות, ולאט לאט להגיע בעצם למסר.
אז אני אדבר על התגובות הרגשיות שלי לשיר, מה מושך אותי בו. אז זה שיר עם המון אמביוולנטיות. מצד אחד יש אינטימיות במפגש הזה בין האב, הבן והאלוהים של האב, איך שהוא מציג אותו ככה, אלוהי. הוא לא רוצה לחפות על הילד, הוא לא אומר אלוהינו, כן? יש שם בחירה. אז מצד אחד זה מאוד אינטימי ובלתי פורמלי, עיסוק בשמות, שאלות חופשיות. מצד שני, לא מתקיימת שיחה פתוחה עד הסוף. יש יותר מדי מתח. הוא לא מסוגל לתת לזה לקרות. אלוהים מתחיל לדבר, הוא שומע את המילים המפורסמות האלה, הוא יודע בה אחר כך, והוא לא רוצה לשאת את הטראומה הזאת. אז הוא עושה עצמו לא שומע. הוא לא יכול לשמוע עד הסוף את מה שלאלוהים יש לומר. וכשהבן שואל אותו את השאלה הזאת, את מי תאהב יותר, במקום להיכנס לזה, הוא מסיח את דעתו. כלומר, הוא מנחה את השיחה כזה, הוא שולט בה. זה לא דיאלוג חופשי שם. אז אהבתי מאוד את ההתייחסות העדינה למתחים האלה, וגם יש בסוף מין משחק עם פרספקטיבה. כאילו, אנחנו שם על הדשא עם החיפושית, כזה בגובה העיניים של הילד, וגם מסתכלות למעלה לשמיים, שזה מזכיר לנו את אלוהים, רואים את המטוס, שזה משהו מאוד חומרי מהעולם שלנו, מיצירת האדם, אבל רואים את זה קטן, כמו בפרספקטיבה של הילד, וזה גם משחק עם הפרספקטיבה המתחלפת בין השאלות של אלוהים, של הילד, ההנחיה של האב. המון קורה שם.
את העניין של, הוא משתמש הרבה טוב, זה אנחנו יודעים, באילוזיות, רמזים, בלי להגיד שום דבר באופן ישיר. כשהוא מדבר בעצם על הסיפור הזה של עקדת יצחק, הוא לא מסיים את המשפט. הוא משתמש רק בחלק מהמשפט, ואנחנו בתור קוראים משלימים את זה בעצמנו, בלי שאנחנו בכלל, בלי שהוא יגיד את סוף המשפט. אנחנו כולנו יודעים לאן זה הולך, והוא בעצם עוצר לפני שהוא מסיים את המשפט שלו, ובעצם משאיר את הכל לאינטרפטציה. אז החוסר
המוחשיות הזו, הקונקרטיות שחסרה שם, זה משאיר את כל השיר כפתוח לפרשנות.
גם יש כל הציטוטים בתוך השיר בקשר לסידור, למחזור, לתלמוד, וחשבתי גם כמחנך, שזה גם, השיר כזה יכול גם לחבר בין אלה שלומדים עברית כשפה מודרנית, וגם אלה שלומדים את עברית כלשון הקודש, והקשר בין ההוראה לשפה מודרנית ובין לימודי קודש בבתי הספר שלנו.
שאפשר באמת כאילו לקרוא את השיר, לשאול מי מזהה את הפסוק הזה, ואז להביא לילדים תנ"ך, ושיחפשו את הפסוק. לתת להם למצוא את זה בעצמם, כאילו לתת להם את הפסוק, שימצאו את זה פיזית בספר. יש בזה משהו מאוד חזק. לראות כאילו את אותן מילים, כמעט אותן מילים, בתנ"ך ובשיר, וכאילו את הקפיצה בזמן ובאינטרטקסטואליות.
וההמשכיות של כאשר אנחנו מדברים על לימודי קודש, כאשר אנחנו מדברים על תורה, אז אפשר לשאול את השאלה אם גם השיר הזה זה גם חלק של הקאנון הזה של לימודי קודש וספרי קודש.
כן, אני גם רציתי רק להוסיף אולי כשאלה פתוחה, האם זה בכלל שיר, כאילו האם זה קצר, כן? אז אנחנו קוראים את זה כשיר, והוא פורסם בספר שירה, אז אנחנו מניחים שזה שיר, אבל יש פה גם, בעצם יש גם איזושהי נימה מאוד פרוזאית כאן, נכון? זה לאו דווקא בדיוק כמו השיר שאפשר לחתוך אותו לשורות, ויש כאן מצד אחד איזשהו דיאלוג, אבל הדיאלוג לא כתוב כמו דיאלוג במחזה, כן? אלא כאילו כל המשפטים זולגים זה לתוך זה, ובעצם במין סיפוריות כזאת, כאילו קצת כמו שגם כתוב המקרא עצמו, נכון? זאת אומרת שפתאום הפסוק מתחיל באמצע המשפט ולא בסופו. דרך השיר נגיע גם, אפשר גם לדבר על המשורר, ודרכו גם להיפתח לכל הנרטיבים השונים שהשירה העברית מאפשרת לנו לחשוב עליהם ביחס לזהויות ישראליות. זאת אומרת, להתחיל לפרוט את מה שאנחנו חושבים עליו כזהות ישראלית, בעצם לאפשרויות שונות ואיזה סוג של נרטיבים אפשר ללמוד עליהם בתוך החברה הישראלית, שנרצה להזמין אתכם כעת לפגוש גם את המשורר, קורא את השיר בקולו. אני רק אבקש שבזמן שאתם מקשיבים ומקשיבות לשיר, כאילו תציצו שנייה, איך שמעתם אותי קוראת, איך קראתם אותו בלב, אם קראתם אותו שוב בתוך הלינק, ואיפה זה יפגוש, ומה קורה כשאתם שומעים את קולו של אלמוג בהר, קורא את השיר, מה מודגש, מה מוסתר, וכן הלאה.
עד שהגיע לגיל 3 לא סיפרתי לבני על אלוהים, שלא יפחד. וכשנעשה בן 3 ערכתי ביניהם היכרות. זה אלוהי, אמרתי לבני. זה בני, אמרתי לאלוהי. שאלו כל אחד שאלות זה על זה. בני שאל, האם אלוהיך זה הוא אחד מקרובנו, כמו סב, כמו דוד? לא בדיוק, עניתי לו. אלוהי שאל, מה שם בנך? עניתי לו שמות רבים לבני, מתוק ומתוק אל, חמוד וחמוד אל, חביב וחביב אל. בני שאל, מה שם אלוהיך? עניתי לו שמות רבים לאלוהי, הוא אבינו מלכנו, והוא הקדוש ברוך הוא, והוא ריבונו של עולם, והוא השם יתברך, והוא אל ואלוהים ואלוהי. אלוהי החל אומר, בנך יחידך אשר אהבת, ומיד השמתי עצמי כמי ששוב אינו שומע את קולו. בני שאל, את מי תאהב יותר? ושמחתי שהופיע המילה אהבה בדיבורו, ומיד הסחתי דעתו בהצביעי על מטוס שחלף בשמיים ועל חיפושית שעברה בינינו בדשא, ובמקום לומר לו, כל אלו מעשה אלוהי, אמרתי לו, יפים, נכון?
אז תודה לכולם.
תודה לך, מיכל. גם לך מגיעה תודה.
So first of all, we hope everyone enjoyed it. We know that many of the people speak very, very quickly in a language that is quite compact. And so when you translate it into English, it's about 2/3, a third more of the words, and they fly by quickly. But we'll be happy to share this with you by link as well. Besides, obviously, the power of hearing the poet share the poem with his own voice, and we got all of those beautiful ayns and those beautiful chets. Would love to kind of open up the discussion. First of all, no one here has to do a deep analysis of poetry. Some of us love to do that. Others, as we know, we heard poetry sometimes has a certain amount of stigma, but would love to hear any reactions. What thoughts or feelings did this poem instill in you or pull out or cause in relationship to the sounds of the Hebrew and the words of the Hebrew and the ideas of the poet?
I'll start. First of all, I don't speak Hebrew, but it was thrilling for me to be able to follow it. Thank you for doing that with the titles. It was fine. It didn't fly past, maybe because I had read it with the package. But what really struck me, and I think it's because of me, not because of the way that was done, because I question God's existence. And I know when my kids ask me about God, I don't really know how to answer them. And I thought I heard it in the way he said it and distracted it, although I didn't hear that quite when your professionals spoke it. I might be totally off, but that's.
So I don't know that there are no wrong answers in terms of how does any individual react to a piece of poetry, and that sort of the experience that we've curated. Other reactions or thoughts that people had to either the poem, the words, the sounds, the meaning.
I was struck by the intimacy that the poem brought forth. I had always assumed the poet was female. It showed such an intimacy with the children that I associated it with a mother-child, and I really enjoyed the poem.
Neil, it's wonderful because when I was working on less the translation of the poem, but more the translation of the comments from our Hebrew at the Center colleagues, I was very attuned to the fact that it's a gendered language, and yet the themes, certainly the themes about parenting, how we decide to write out the name of God, when a pronoun is used, where we might use a pronoun in Hebrew and be sometimes forced to make a choice between is it he or is it who, is it he or she. This process really forced me to think about it, and also think about some of my colleagues and how they might want to make certain that we were leaving some of the ambiguity that can exist or that you can squeeze out of Hebrew. into this. So that was a very interesting, a comment, Neil, that you kind of switched. I am curious. Michal asked us, what did the poem sound like when she read it versus when we read it? It's a lovely expression when you, in Hebrew, you say, not that you read to yourself, but that you read in your heart. When you read the poem in your heart, versus when Almog Behar read the poem, any reactions to those different approaches to the reading?
Well, I'm thinking I'm kind of focused on one particular thing that it seems that, and imagine who can use this, what kind of setting, what is this? Is this a high schoolers do this? This is adults, very minimally observant family, community, or whatever, and how far could it be versatile in a mono-Orthodox community? I don't know, but it doesn't fall into an easy sort of division, saying it can be identified very quickly and easily. I think it's a kind of a bit mysterious as to what the conversations would be in different settings.
So I'd love to ask Esti to react to that.
I think it goes back to poetry and freedom of poetry and interpretation. And my initial statement when teachers asked me if this is appropriate in my context, can I bring it? First of all, I want to say that this particular poem makes me very proud of how Israeli society has evolved over the years, especially we're talking about 75 years. Hopefully there's no setback, but evolved in the sense that there is place and pride for Middle Eastern, or with this chet and ayin accent, to have this on the internet, and it's so beautifully done. And we could share that with our students. And I think that you mentioned whether it's adults or kids or young children, kids with background in Judaism or not. I think teachers should choose to expose their students regardless, and go as far as they feel comfortable in their own context. Just like, I don't know, other topics that we do as parents, the advice is not maybe to ignore, but rather to address, but to the point that the child is satisfied, or, right, it's okay. So I think our job as educators, and there is a statement that says that education is political, and I truly believe that education is political. And by not sharing this with our students, I think we're making a choice, a political choice, to hide this from them and hide an important part of Israeli society. So I think we have the obligation to share it, to bring it. And whatever we do with it could just be the presence of it in the landscape of the school. How far we go with it, that's up to whatever the context is. That's my personal opinion. Thank you.
Other reactions to the poem, or to sort of Hebrew culture in general. One of our sort of implicit goals of strengthening Hebrew language is we want to make Hebrew culture much more accessible to more people. And so I get sort of I'd love to hear some reactions, other people's thinking about the importance of of culture and of poetry and of Hebrew music. It's probably only our strongest students can take on novels and longer pieces of literature, but they certainly can. I was in a Jewish day school a few weeks ago doing a visit. It's a large community school, and their top Hebrew class was reading some quotes from Buber, which were, I don't think Buber wrote them in Hebrew, he probably wrote them in German, but they were reading them in Hebrew and discussing them in Hebrew. So, pretty high level kind of Hebrew culture can be made accessible. Any reactions or thoughts on the importance of making this culture a normative part of our Jewish educational experiences and our lives, including watching Fauda or Shtizzle.
I think it's interesting, actually, when you mention Fauda Shtizzle, and when you think about Israeli culture and how it has, come to the diaspora and to North America, and the popularity of so many of the Israeli TV series, which is kind of exotic in a sense, and yet I think about as somebody who has a certain level of proficiency in Hebrew, how when I'm watching it, a certain pride that wells up, or a certain connection that I feel just because I can follow a lot of it in the Hebrew. It is interesting the way that the popularity of so many of those series actually it's kind of cool to know Hebrew, to have a connection to Israel. And I'm wondering how that translates. I remember at one point at the day school in Boston at JCDS, when we had gotten TV satellites, and the kids would spend their lunches into the Hebrew classrooms so they could watch various Hebrew, soap operas or whatever it was that is, like this great treat.
I saw Manette. What were
Yeah.
you? Please
No, I
share.
was gonna say, like, it's interesting because to that point, I've heard from my kids a recurring theme, which has been a barrier of really between them and integrating in Israel culture. 3 of our 4 kids live in Israel, but our daughter, who just finished serving in the IDF, made a similar comment to our son, who had been in a mechina, which is, no matter how good their Hebrew is, and hers is really good. She was a radio operator in her combat unit, so it's pretty good. She said culturally, and they always use the example that they don't understand each other's jokes. And it made me think that maybe some humor, maybe giving kids humorous things so that like they start to catch, because there is a real, like they would, both of them commented during their time, in these programs, that it was like, no matter how much they tried to integrate, they always felt that they didn't have the same, like kind of experience to draw on, and the jokes. They don't laugh at my jokes, and I don't laugh at their, and I don't get their jokes, and they don't get my jokes. So anyway,
First of all, Minette, kol hakavod to you and Louis, and to your daughter for her service, and your children who are living in Israel, kol hakavod. When I think about, the people of a certain age and sort of Schoolhouse Rock or Free to Be You and Me, or certain like phenomena that sort of shaped our childhood. And then you have to say, all right, how do I think about what the equivalents might be? In Israel, Hakeves Hashishasar, the 16th Lamb, a very important children's book, all set to music. The culture really is an entree. Language is an entree into culture, and culture is an entree into understanding. And Diane, it looked like you had unmiked as well.
I had unmiked because I think years ago when I first came to Israel, I always saw like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, the families would be out with babies kind of thing. And it didn't seem to bother them. I mean, I always, we put our kids to bed 7 o'clock at night. I mean, we were exhausted, and I'm sure they were exhausted. And I never really understood that about the culture until somebody said to me, but Diane, these kids, when they grow up, they're going to be in the army, and the parents want to give them all they possibly can while they're young and babies. I don't know if that's a difference between their culture and our culture, because I think we spoil our kids a whole lot too. But this was years ago. Could you explain to me a little bit about how parents see their children as babies, and is it something to do with that?
I could share as a parent, as an Israeli parent to two boys that I raised both in Israel and here, and I don't represent the culture, right? I represent myself, but I think, and some of my friends, but I think there is also a cultural difference in terms of boundaries and adhering to some family rules, so I think it's more the American families, my friends, my colleagues, it seems like it's much more clear and strict and all that. Whereas in Israel, maybe it's the air, maybe it's, I don't know what it is, we're less, it's not about 7 o'clock or whatever, it's just spending time with the kids, and I don't know.
And with that, I want to thank Esty. Happens to be that one of those two boys is turning 20, and she's about to host a birthday party. She's no longer the parent of teenagers, so we're going to bid her an early Laila Tov. Esty. Kind of a last thought, both about the poem, but also about Hebrew culture. I mean, one of the things that I loved about this poem was the Hebrew itself is quite accessible, and it really is a text in dialogue with the Torah. Like it is a recapitulation of this ancient story, this ancient experience where a father is in a moment of truth, and both in dialogue with his own son, as well as in dialogue with God. And even though the poem is all about names, we actually never learn the name of either the father or of the son. But in the title, it says, I didn't tell my son, Beni. I didn't tell my son, Beni, about God until he was 3. And in the Akedah story itself, that same word, Beni, my son, shows up a number of times, including when Isaac says to Abraham, as they're walking, I see the wood and I see the fire, but where is, the korban? What are we going to offer up to God? And Abraham's response is, God will show us Beni. You're going to be, both, don't worry, my son, but also you're the object of that moment. Like, I think there's a universal dimension of this piece of culture, of this beautiful poem, but there's also a it's very much anchored in sort of a Jewish culture. And I think that's part of the the task that we have in front of us in our work is how do we make certain that we are giving our students and ourselves and our peers the Hebrew tools not only to access that Hebrew culture, but also to access the Jewish culture. So thank you all for spending a little bit of time unpacking and not only getting a sense of what we might be able to do with Hebrew poetry and Hebrew culture in our Hebrew language instruction, but also it was a pleasure to be able to share with you some of the wonderful members of our team here at Hebrew at the Center. As we're not yet celebrating our 75th, we're only celebrating our 15th. So we have a long way to go. But we also are sort of evolving and growing and maturing and bringing lots of different perspectives to the table. I would love to, just share a couple of quick highlights with you, because so many of you have been involved in making and enabling us to be able to do these wonderful things. I want to take note, in particular, Rabbi Josh Elkin, who's based in Seattle, has been our guy on the ground. At the end of April, we'll be launching a 12-school, 3-city, 2-country, 2-year-long Hebrew educators initiative. We have all of the Hebrew teachers in all 12 Jewish day schools in Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver that will be working together across the region, across their communities, across denominations. Also, we'll be bringing our experts to Pacific Northwest rather than requiring them to come to us. And we're incredibly excited to be launching those types of initiatives in our day school space. And Josh has been invaluable as our eyes and ears and feet on the ground in Seattle, both to connect us to everybody as well as to help line up the funding that's going to enable this over $350,000 initiative over the next 2 years. We're also quite excited. We are going to be, we're very close to pulling all of the different pieces together, but to kind of launch a new initiative that'll initially be in a discovery phase to work with a number of key players in the Jewish day school space about helping students with language, with dyslexia and language-based learning disabilities to have an easier pathway into Hebrew. We know that many of our day schools can support students with their general studies learning, or they're able to bring in outside resources from the school district. But we know that if students don't have an easy pathway into Hebrew, it not only has an impact on their Hebrew studies, it has impact on their Jewish studies, it has impact on how they see themselves, it has impact on sort of their sense of what it means to be a Jewish learner. And as a former head of school, I can also tell you, their parents come in and feel like they're not being served. We have to really attack this head on. And we're excited to be bringing together Prisma and the Consortium on Jewish Day Schools and Torah Masorah, as well as Sulam and Gateways and Madik and all of the kind of players to say, how do we learn together? Where is there wisdom? Where are there holes? What we can do? What can we do to approach this in a systematic way? So we're excited to be here in this role as catalyst and convener. We're very excited that our camping program continues to grow and that we're now rolling out the new approaches to Hebrew engagement and joy into year-round settings. I want to take note, Diane, your daughter Sarah was one of our informants. I gathered a group of congregational educators who cared about Hebrew, and they helped us think about how do we translate the camp stuff to congregational schools. We've been working similarly with folks from the JCC world. We've been working with people in youth groups. We think this is an incredibly exciting way to bring Hebrew to those individuals in those settings. And we're also excited, we just reached an agreement with Honeymoon Israel to help them develop their Lama Ivrit, their Why Hebrew, then train all of their clergy, their city leaders, and their trip leaders on how to bring Hebrew into this critical experience for young families who are trying to figure out, how do I build a Jewish family? And we'll be also providing them with some Hebrew programming materials for the trips. So the work that we're doing in the day schools, the work that we're doing in the informal education is making some really great progress. And then the general work that we're doing just to change the story. We need to spend more time focusing on successes and pointing out the kinds of things that are absolutely possible if we make the right investment in terms of time and resources. We've been excited to be going to a number of conferences to speak and to share the message of Hebrew to educators. I'm off to Chicago next week as one of the featured guests at ICON. Had the opportunity to be at Prisma recently. We have a paper coming out from the Luxstein Center on what's going on in camp. We're doing a presentation at the association, the Network for Research in Jewish Education in Boston in the spring. We've been putting out op-ed pieces, and we just launched our State of the Field, which if you haven't seen, we'll make certain to send you a copy, where we're bringing together the knowledge of the field, curating that, then amplifying it and sharing it with others. And a day has not gone by in the last week and a half where I haven't been on a call with somebody who has referenced it. And we were just invited yesterday to turn what we're doing in the Pacific Northwest into an article for Prisma's Haydion. So getting out there and engaging people with the conversation about the importance of Hebrew, and making certain that we can be good partners and add value everywhere we go is quite wonderful. And we just really couldn't do that without you. So I want to thank all of you for the support that you've provided, your wisdom, your time, your commitment. You certainly made Arnie's day, you make my day, and you make the day of everyone else on our team. It's an exciting time to be at Hebrew at the Center, and it's an exciting time for Hebrew in North America and the world. With that, I'll turn it back to, I'm happy to take a question or two, or to turn it back to Arnie.
Anybody have a question for Andrew about anything he's shared? It is really exciting around here, and I can only I don't have words to express my appreciation for Andrew's leadership, for our partnership, for our team, Esty, who you got to experience some of her insights. She's a phenomenal educator, and my partner Leah, who's with us tonight, who's really helping us spread the word and reach out to more and more people in order to make more of this happen. And it doesn't happen without really you need a whole village to make this happen, and we've been in it for the long haul. So, and we're seeing the progress. That's what's so exciting. So I want to thank the team here. I'm struck by some of the things we heard tonight. Manette, this idea of teaching kids humor is, I think, such a great idea. I can already think of a bunch of educators that I'll share that with, if they aren't already doing some of that, what will emerge from just planting the seed. I think it was a great insight. I was also struck in, Andrew, when you in mentioning B'ni, my son, and how it shows up in the poem and how it shows up in the biblical reference, and thinking about not only how important it is to us modern Hebrew, but that the biblical Hebrew, what the depth of biblical Hebrew, biblical references do for exposing the richness of modern Hebrew. And that is why, our day schools are really so critical, because of they do have the opportunity to bring all these pieces together. And it's the investment in the educators there that really allows them to bring that gift to the children. So I want to thank all of you, because your investments in what we do is really about our investment in those educators and the educators' investment in our children. And we're really here for that. They want to see the next, every generation going forward really have the opportunity to experience and keep this gift and the continuity that Hebrew brings from generation to generation to just keep moving forward. So I thank you all. I hope you all had a Chag Sameach. I hope that we can all marshal all of our strength to celebrate the 75th year of Israel and to see it really thrive in the future.
Amen.